proximity to Trinity site. Wow. Even Socorro, White Sands, this place in Texas. Like, that's kind of unusual. We're kind of scratching our heads. Do you think there's a correlation? So anyway, we didn't really take it much further than that, but we definitely took notice. And then I met with Senator Harry Reid. Thank you, George Knapp, for helping make that happen. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who started the ATIP program. And during the interview, I didn't think about asking him this, but at the end, and he had like, I'll have 47 minutes with you, and then I got to go. And he's got all the security guards and big guys with big earpieces looking at me. I said, well, sir, would you mind if we could do a quick walk and talk? He goes, yeah, I'll give you 45 seconds. So I figured, well, while I'm walking with Senator Reid, I'm going to ask him what was one of the more astonishing aspects of the phenomenon that they uncovered during this Pentagon UFO program. And right away, without hesitation, he goes, the fact that there are incursions over our nuclear missile facilities, nuclear armed facilities, that is of grave concern. That was a shocking aspect of the phenomenon. And I thought back to that map that we done in the edit room. So I was like, I gotta go back to the drawing board. So I spent a year. I contacted this guy named Robert Hastings, who's the guy who wrote the book on the connection between UFOs and nukes.
What is the book?
His name is Robert Hastings, UFOs and Nukes, I think. But in any case, I contacted him, and he's like, oh, I'm not doing too well. I got this heart condition. I tell you what, you can have all my archives, all the videos that I shot. So I went through all of it, and I put together just like a 5 or 10 minute segment in the phenomenon, that connection. And you got all these like missile control launch officers and people at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Minot Air Force Base, talking about these incredible incursions. And keep in mind, you're talking about people that we entrusted with the securement and deployment of nuclear weapons, okay? So if these guys are lying, that's a problem. And if these guys are hallucinating when they've got nuclear weapons at their disposal, that's terrifying. And it's happening all over. I mean, I've got at least 15 or 20 of these guys testifying. And Robert Hastings got a bunch more. My point is, there does seem to be a connection. I interviewed this guy, Robert Salas. Robert Salas was Lieutenant Robert Salas, Launch Control Officer of the United States Air Force, has this incredible encounter in Maelstrom. Right? His people do. And UFO sighted, a disc, and then his nuke starts shutting down. He said to me, I'll never forget this. And this is like 2002. This is part of Out of the Blue. He goes, well, James, very calm. You could see why he was a launch control officer, very measured. Everything that came out of his mouth was calm and measured. He goes, well, James, the way I see it, it's kind of like taking matches out of the hands of a baby.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa, right?
Well, that makes sense.
So there's a preponderance of testimony from these guys, and they're testifying right now to Arrow, Sean Kirkpatrick. But we can get back to...
What does Arrow stand for?
Look it up. It's an acronym. It's the new UAP task force. There was OSAP, then it went to ATIP, then it went to UAP task force, then it went to...
Why do they keep changing the name?
I know they keep changing the name. Maybe it's like a rebranding or something. It's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
Did you see the photo that I posted on Instagram of the story of the guy from Space Force?
Yeah.
It says we may be facing threats outside this world.
Yeah,
what the fuck does that mean?
I just don't even want to spend this time.
Space Force boss acknowledges the U.S. will begin facing threats outside of Earth. What the hell are you saying? What are you saying, man? What does that mean?
Can I read a statement that...
Can I ask you one question?
Absolutely.
Because we're still on the subject of the nuclear base.
This is relevant to this.
How many of them were there? How many different sightings were at these missile bases and in areas where they're testing nukes?
There are a lot of cases. I think cases in just about all the installations in the United States. I mean, Robert Hastings can...
Every installation in the United States has cases?
I can't say that definitively.
But a lot of them do.
A lot of them. I put 15, 20, 25. Let me give you another example. Joint Base, Rendlesham Forest, December 1980. It's a joint British-U.S. base. It's called the Rendlesham Forest Incident. There was a landing, December 1980. You've got Jim Peniston, John Burroughs and this guy Ed Cabanzag, thinking that like something crashed in the forest or something. They went out to investigate, and there's an object sitting on the forest floor. It's a kind of like a triangular shaped object, and it's dark. It's warm to the touch, and they sat with it on the ground. Cabanzag acted like as a relay between the base and where this object is sitting on the ground. Jim Pennison took photographs of it. He had his log book. He wrote down the symbols that were on the craft, which were crazy. And then the deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Halt, I interviewed him. He had, because sightings can happen over a period of a week or more, a lot of times when you get these mass sightings. And even the deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Halt, became a witness. He was skeptical, and then he too became a witness. And he said that these objects, there's a recording of him while it's happening. It's out there in the ether. We're shooting beams of light down into the weapons storage area. That was December 1980. Phenomenal case, the Rendlesham Forest incident. These are like the cases.
What did this object look like?
It was a triangular-shaped object, not that big. I don't know, maybe 6 feet high, and it was black, and he said it was warm to the touch, and it didn't make any sound, very little sound, and then it lifted off the forest floor, maneuvered up through the trees, and shot off at a high rate of speed. Now, these are people that are responsible for the security of our nuclear weapons saying this. The deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Halt, saying this. Gordon Williams, the general of the entire base, I interviewed him as well. He talks about how the fact that this got out, it was a memo that was written by Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Halt that leaked, and the whole story got out. But those are the cases that I'm talking about that represent that 5 or 10% core that cannot be explained away in conventional terms. Defy, after exhaustive research. I mean, Nick Pope talks about it at the MOD. He investigated because it took place in England. He said there were radiation readings at the landing site.
Do these, the crafts that happen at the base, do they have photograph of these things?
Well, Jim Pennison says that he took photographs, and then they said the photographs didn't come out. That's what they told him.
So he took photographs to get developed,
yeah.
And then when they developed them, they said
that's what they said to him. Yes.
Yeah. So most likely they just said.
So then, one of the things that Colonel Charles Halt said, that the deputy base commander, is that a plane came in, and there was some unknown government U.S. agency. I know you guys are probably thinking I'm crazy now, but don't take it from me. I'm just telling you what they told me. Okay. That they came in and kind of sanitized the whole case. But that's a very good case, and it's one of the top cases that it's been investigated in England, it's been investigated in the United States, and a lot of the witnesses have come forward on the record.
So it's quite possible that somewhere in some archive this photo exists, or some photos exist.
Okay.
But here's the question: if the government keeps coming out and telling us that we may begin to face threats from outside of this world, if they're telling us that like when they're discussing these things, that they behave in a way that we can't describe, and no propulsion systems that we know of. They're telling us all this. Why wouldn't they release all that other stuff too? Why wouldn't they release those photographs?
What's in it for them?
Well, what's in it for them to tell us about it in the first place?
Well, they're not.
But what's in it for them to even admit? Just the way they're addressing it now.
People think that there was a sudden epiphany with the U.S. government that they wanted to be more transparent, and they wanted the general public to know more about this phenomenon.
Right.
That is not what happened. What happened is a couple of insiders in December of 2017 walked some evidence out of ATIP, found a loophole, and put it on the front page of the New York Times.
Now so it was leakers.
Hell yeah, it was leakers that did that. Yes, it was Christopher Mellon.
Okay.
I actually got a phone call when the film was coming out, and I got a phone call from Leslie Kean, and she goes, Christopher Mellon told you that he was the one that walked the footage out of the Pentagon? I said, yeah, it's on camera.
Well, Christopher Mellon.
She goes, I can't believe that. He didn't even want that in the New York Times. Like, how, I said, I don't know. He just said it. And that's what happened. It wasn't like suddenly the government had this epiphany. So now they can't put the genie back in the bottle. Now you got the David Fravers, right? David Fravers' encounter is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got photographic evidence. That tic-tac. I was investigating a landing case in Socorro, New Mexico. It was April 24th, 1964. So I spent 5 years on this case. It was the case that turned around Dr. Jalen Hynek. Dr. Jalen Hynek investigated UFO reports for the United States Air Force as a scientific advisor from 47 to 69. He's the one that coined all the term close encounter of the first kind, close encounter of the second kind, the close encounter of the third kind. Okay? Close encounter of the first kind is when you see a UFO at close range. Close encounter of the second time, you see a UFO and somehow it interacts with the environment. Whether, like Richard Dreyfuss' face got burnt, or it leaves marks on the ground, or it burns trees, or whatever. The propulsion affects something. Close encounter of the third kind. Now, this is coming out of Air Force Project Blue Book's own files. This is not me saying this. Close encounter of the third kind is when beings are reported by the witnesses. So beings are associated with the craft are reported. One of the best, most well-documented cases in U.S. history took place in Quart, New Mexico, April 24th, 1964, at 5 o'clock with a police officer that was on duty by the name of Lonnie Zamora. Best case in U.S. history. The best documented case. The first military officer to arrive on the scene got there, the bushes were still smoking. I mean, the imprints in the ground of the craft, the footprints, they got diagrams of this stuff. And I spent 5 years going back and forth to Quart, New Mexico. I got to know the wife, Mary. I got to know the daughter, Diane, the son, Michael, his co-workers. I went to the National Archives with Ray Stanford. He wrote the book on it. This Quart saucer in a Pentagon pantry. Phenomenal case. And what I learned was that the Air Force, according to his own family, Lonnie Zamora's family, told his daughter this. I have this on camera. The Air Force wanted him desperately not to talk about the beans. They discouraged him to talk about the beans, and I'll tell you why. It's one thing when you see an object, unknown object, like David Fravor saw up in the sky, exhibiting a technology that seems to defy conventional propulsion. And it's another thing altogether when you've got beans on the ground. The Air Force didn't want him talking about that, and that was one thing that his daughter and his wife told me clearly. And his wife said, Lonnie was never the same after that case. But
so what did Lonnie see?
Lonnie saw two beans at the base of an egg-shaped craft that was landed in an arroyo in Quart, New Mexico, in broad daylight. Lonnie looked out the window of his patrol car. He saw something that caught his eye, and then this object landed. He was actually in hot pursuit at the time. He gave up pursuit to go investigate what was going on, and he sees this object in the arroyo in the desert on the ground. It's such a well-documented case. And he rolls down his car window and he's looking out and he's going, am I looking at like an overturned car? What the hell am I looking at? And then he sees two little figures. He said they were childlike at the base of the craft, and one of them locked eyes with him. And his wife said he was never the same after that. But
how did he describe them?
He said they were small, childlike, small, and they had white coveralls, tight coveralls. It was a close encounter of the third kind.
What did they say their faces looked like?
He didn't give a lot of detail. I went to Lonnie's house. I got to know his wife quite well. Lonnie had passed a couple of years prior to that, and I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you want to go in this case, because we could talk on this case for 3 hours, but whatever. I could tell you that I got access to, he had this black duffel bag, and it was with his wife's permission. He had kept all the original newsprints from the articles that had come out, and that's where I got the details. And he also talked about it in some recordings that I got from his family and other researchers. It's in the movie, The Phenomenon. And that's where I got the primary description, because it was Richard T. Holder was the first military officer on the scene. The FBI got involved later.
How long was that thing sitting out there for?
The object was sitting on the ground, not for very long, just a few minutes. Lonnie saw the beans, and he went like around to get a closer look. I mean, he was like, what the hell am I looking at? And he drove his car around to get a closer look, and he lost contact with it for a second while he drove around to get a closer look. Now he's within 50 feet of this egg thing sitting on the ground. And he gets out of the patrol car. It starts making some weird noise, and it has a blue flame that comes out. And he said it was not like a rocket flame where it would hit the ground and dust everything up, but it pierced the ground like a knife through warm butter. And then when it got about 20 feet off the ground, it went completely silent with no flame, no nothing. You can hear a pin drop. There was a symbol on the side of the craft. It was in yellow. It was about 3 feet tall, and it was like a V like this, 2 lines. And
let's get a photo of that symbol that he recreated.
Yeah, you'll see fake symbols because Richard T. Holder asked him to draw a different symbol. I actually have the original symbol on a document from Dr. Hynek.
Why did someone ask him to draw a fake symbol?
Because he said that if anybody else claimed to see the same craft with that symbol, they would immediately be able to identify a hoster.
Oh, so what's the real one?
The real one is that one right there with the two lines in that upside down V right there. That's the real one.
That's the real one.
Yeah, and I've got the document in Dr. Jalen Hynek's own handwriting. Ray Stanford and I went to the National Archives and found it. It was a huge find.
So they did that on purpose just in case some copycat people started coming up with it?
He did. Richard T. Holder, and I met Richard T. Holder's two kids and talked to them about it. I talked to his wife about it, and they said, yeah, he was told that's not the genuine. That's the one right there. Right there. That you're looking at. That's the real one. No question. So anyway, my point is,
he drew. Is that his handwritten note over there that shows it?
Yeah, that's definitely. I actually found the original one of those. That's it. That's the document that I found with Ray Stanford at the National Archives in 2013. This is in Dr. Hynek's own handwriting. Enclosed suggests any resemblance to the, and he draws the symbol of Socorro. Maybe yeah. I mean, it was kind of a genius move, quite honestly.
So this was the case that turned J. Allen Hynek?
So yeah, so what happened was, Jacques Vallée, was it right?
So that's what it looked like? Similar to a Tic Tac.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. But when it got to about 20 feet off the ground, it went completely silent. No blue flame, nothing. The landing gear was retracted. It was just an egg. And it floated off in the distance. In fact, Lonnie, I've got an interview with Lonnie where he says that one of the officers who arrived on the scene actually saw it fly off in the distance, and it was witnessed by other people in the town that saw the thing flying.
Didn't the Tic Tac, the people who saw the Tic Tac, including Commander Fravor, didn't he say that there was some sort of thing that almost looked like landing gear?
No, there was something that protruded out in the front of it or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But apparently the video, I think it was according to Fravor, the video is the one that's been out is the resolution is a lot worse than what other people had seen at the time. I remember, I'm pretty sure David Fravor said that to me. But yeah, so I just recently went, I'm filming a new doc, and I went to Washington, D.C. for a month to get kind of caught up on what's been happening, because a lot's been happening. While I'm doing Moment of Contact, there's an unprecedented effort in Washington, D.C. to push for further government transparency. Marco Rubio, Senator Gillibrand, Representative Andre Carson, who got the congressional hearings that happened last year, Representative Gallego and Gallagher, all been involved, in others. And so I got introduced to some intelligence folks on the inside, and they wanted me to read this to your audience, okay? And this is about evidence.
Okay.
So, and this was pretty much a reaction to the latest hearing that happened with Gillibrand just a couple of days ago last week. I will remain anonymous, but I have been monitoring the UFO, and I met this guy, I know this guy's legit. The UFO-UAP activity and the authorities' response to them. I can assure you there's a lot more evidence behind the curtain that hasn't been released. First, our military are and have been seeing remarkable things in the sky, in the oceans, and on the land for years. Of those reported, where does all this information get stored? Authorities would have you believe this data is destroyed, but unique data is stored somewhere to be reviewed later. And as someone that has seen the classified holdings, I am very disappointed in the fact that Dr. Kirkpatrick showed some of the most mundane videos to the public. I do understand that there are security factors to be considered, so I'm hoping that Senator Gillibrand saw something much more interesting in her closed-door hearing with Kirkpatrick. And why did only 2 senators show up for the hearing? Have they lost faith in Kirkpatrick already? I applaud Senator Gillibrand's efforts to find the truth, but I am more sure than ever that Kirkpatrick is not the one.
Interesting. So he's withholding some information.
Yeah, these people went on camera for me. It's going to be released when the time is right. But I've got,
Again, it's one of those things conveniently, like Lucy pulling the ball away from Charlie Brown.
It's
right when you get close.
It's so frustrating.
I can only imagine.
So frustrating.
Christopher Mellon said that there's very high resolution photographs.
So he now has he just met with me in D.C. and he's now told me that there's satellite data. And the only reason why he talked about it is because Ratcliffe mentioned it. So he's like, well, Ratcliffe mentioned it, so I'll mention the fact that Ratcliffe mentioned it. It's satellite data. And I was like, oh, how good are the photographs? I want to know so bad. You know me. Like, come on, I've been looking at this for 30 years.
Yeah.
How good are the photographs? He goes, James, 4K. Just think about as good as you can imagine of craft. And to know that, and I spoke to 5 other people that are part of the program or had the top secret clearances to access to this, and they all confirmed. And it's like they're just on the other side of that curtain. Could somebody just get those out here, please? Please.
Do you think we're closer than ever to those things being leaked?
I think that if we keep the pressure on, I think it's very important. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is that sometimes they could leak something that looks amazing, right? And then you put your fingerprints all over it and you send it out into the ether, and then it's gets debunked.
Right.
So you got to be kind of careful if you don't know provenance. And so
I would imagine they would do stuff like that on purpose.
Oh, these guys are so smart. They're like 5 steps ahead of us, So, but I know what I know not because I read it out of a book, but I actually went into the field. I mean, I travel. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I was interviewing generals and cosmonauts in Russia back in the late '90s. I went to China, I went to Australia, I went to Africa, I went to Russia, as I was just saying, all across Europe. I really want to know. Like, I'm so curious, and I like to go to location. I like to give you an example. I found out in China just a couple of years ago, there's a case that happened in 1994, the same time as Rua, called Mengjiaogua in the Black Forest of China. And these guys, in the middle of nowhere, relayed the same telepathic message that the children received in Rua, Zimbabwe, in 1994 at Ariel School. And by the way, I did include a piece of that in the film that I did with the girl. That was only like 10 minutes long. Quite fascinating. That's a damn good case. That's in one of the 10% cases that I talk about. There's a film out now, I think it's called Ariel Phenomenon. And it's all just about that case. But those are the... Should we get back to 45 and work my way up? Or do you want to talk a little bit about moment of contact?
We can
Because moment of contact is the case that could settle this debate once and for all. Or
let's tease people for a bit with moment of contact,
okay,
because it is an amazing documentary.
I won't go into details. I won't go into any details. I'll just say this: I put my reputation on the line for this. I get it. It sounds so spectacular. It sounds so unbelievable.
But when you watch the documentary, it sounds less spectacular. Well, similarly spectacular, yes, but more believable.
So here's the point.
Okay.
It's either the most elaborate, complex hoax that involves half the town of Argenio. There's like 130,000 people living there. I mean, I go down to the town square and just start talking to people. I did it in the movie. And everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle. Most people have a piece of the puzzle. It's phenomenal. Or a UFO crashed. Live aliens were recovered. And the Americans, it was captured by the Brazilian authorities, and the Americans stepped in and flew some of that back to the United States. And that's when the case goes cold. There's no in between.
That's definitely the sexiest version.
There's no in between. But
you speak of the sexiest versions. This is I was looking up the thing in '94 in China and stumbled across this.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
The most bizarre contact in China occurred in June 7, 1994, when, how do you say his name? Mengjiaogua of Phoenix Mountain how do you say that? Fujian province met a female alien. First, there was electricity between them. Then things got amorous. According to Meng, the female alien looked like a white monster. She was very tall, about 2.5 meters, and wore tight clothes with only her big eyes and private parts exposed. She did something to him that felt like an electric shock, and he passed out. When he came round, he found several scars on his body. According to Wu, she planted something mung bean-sized into his body. Things were about to get even stranger. Meng had sexual intercourse with the female alien. She suddenly fell down on him. He could hardly move. His penis felt hot, then ached. The experience was more pleasurable than anything he had ever felt. That's him?
Yeah, I gave him a lie detector test.
And he passed it?
I did not hear about that aspect of the encounter. I heard about
passed those, especially crazy people.
Yeah, I did not hear about that aspect of it. But I didn't go. But my point is,
that dude was banging aliens.
Yeah.
Respect. Respect. That takes a lot of courage. But I was very attracted to the Avatar lady, the big blue one that saves him. She's hot.
So
she's hot.
We'll go back here. Let's go.
I think she's hot.
Let's go back because
I'd fucking switch right over to that.
I am here. So we'll get back to moment of contact. I just want to say the last thing. This moment of contact, then we'll get back to the other cases. It's either the case we've all been waiting for, the case that can settle the debate once and for all, right? If it's true. Could you think of a more extraordinary, let's just say, hypothetically for a moment, it happened, as all the witnesses stated it happened. How big of a story do you think that is?
It's an immense story, because it means that they're real. If it's true, that it means they're real. That means something that we don't understand was in the sky, got hit by lightning, got caught up in a furious lightning storm, and wound up crashing. And that these things survived, and they got out, and the fact that one guy handled one of them and got this insane infection and died very quickly afterwards, and he was very young and healthy, military man. And the fact that all these people have the same story. They all have the same depiction of the disc, the craft. They have the same depictions of seeing these beings.
Not one witness came to us. We had to track down every one of those witnesses, and there's a story behind each and every one of them that I could go on for an hour for.
I'm sure.
I won't bore you with the details, but suffice
you wouldn't
to say.
Won't bore me, bro. We got a gravity bomb over there. We could be here for days.
Oh my gosh. I'd be like...
I know. But there's nothing that goes better than marijuana and aliens.
When I went, every time I'd get back from Brazil, I'd get home, and I'm out there for a month, knocking on doors, talking to witnesses, chasing people down, trying to convince them to come forward, like crazy.
Yeah, this is not like a quick venture to make this documentary.
12 years. That's insane. And so, wow. And so I'd come home from a trip in Brazil, and I'm telling you, man, it was like my mind was just torqued. I'm in another alternate reality. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm coming to the realization that this happened.
When that man takes you to the spot and he gets overwhelmed with emotion.
He was gone for 25 years. Marco Leal, thank you, Marco, and co. I said to Marco, that guy, we don't have a story. We got to find Carlos de Souza.
Yeah, unless that guy is a Daniel Day-Lewis quality actor.
We don't need Brad Pitt anymore, nor Leonardo DiCaprio. This guy.
That guy, if he's full of shit,
best actor.
He's one of the best actors ever, because that moment when he gets to that spot and he's overwhelmed with emotion, he starts tearing up and, and he's freaking out. Like, just imagine if 25 years ago you experienced something that literally destroyed your understanding of life itself in the universe. That there's a thing out there that can visit us that's different than us, and it's probably been here forever.
My DP, David West, has been shooting for over 40 years, and he's like, I've never seen anything like that. That guy that's about as legit as I've ever seen.
It was so believable.
Crying, and I mean, not only that, but it's like the guy disappeared. He's never made a dime off this. He gave one statement 26 years ago to a guy named Claudio Covo. Claudio Covo was an engineer, and he was a researcher, UFO researcher in Brazil. Thank you, mate. You rest in peace, Claudio Covo. And there was a guy named Uberajada Rodriguez. He was a prominent lawyer. He's also investigated the case. We wouldn't know about this case if it hadn't been for a handful of dogged Brazilian UFO researchers. Pekka Cini deserves credit. This guy named Marco Petit, A.J. Javard. These guys.
Varginha is 150,000.
I think it's like 130,000 that they
So
think.
it's like Boulder, Colorado size.
Yeah. And it's the surrounding areas. But, you know, I was going to include maybe like I did with Rua in the phenomenon. I was going to include like 5 or 10 minutes of that case, and I worked so hard for so long with so many people, and then I just deleted the whole thing out of the film, and I was like, oh God, Marco's going to kill me when he sees this. That I just didn't include any of it because I just couldn't squeeze it in, and there was too much. It was just too much.
Well, I'm glad you did it that way, honestly, because Moment of Contact is it's really. There's a few of these documentaries that I go, God, I shut them off and I go, oh, if that's real, holy shit! Imagine being those people. Imagine being these people in this small city of 150,000 people, and then something happens, and a fucking UFO crashes in a field. And people witness it. And everyone is just stuck there. Then the military shuts the town down.
Can you see this?
Yes.
This is Brigadier Jose Carlos Pereira of the Brazilian Air Force. Okay? I met with him with Marco on 2 occasions. The second occasion was 2000.
Find that camera might be.
I'm so
better,
sorry.
Right? Would it be better? If
Jose.
You got it? No.
Worse.
Okay.
This is Jose. You can look him up. Jose Carlos Pereira, Brigadier, Brazilian Air Force. Okay. So Marco and I met with him twice. The second time was 2013. He gave us an interview. Some of it's in the film. And he said, I'll talk about the 1986 UFOs over Brazil. I'll talk about the Colares case that happened in the 70s. Phenomenal photographic evidence that's out there. You asked me about Virginia, and this interview is terminated. I was like, what? What do you mean terminated? Like, really? So anyway, we do the interview, and I was like, well, I'm not going to ask him, I guess. But when the camera stopped rolling, I was like, please. I mean, Marco and I were begging and pleading with this guy, and I remember looked him dead square in the eyes. I said, I swear on my life, there are no recording devices, there are no cameras rolling. Please, tell us about Virginia. Why did you have that reaction to Virginia? Marco was too. We were begging him. I was practically licking this guy's boots, and he's getting prepared to leave, and he's got a driver waiting for him outside. So we were following and pleading with him all the way out there. Please, just tell us. Please, I swear on my life this happened. He gets in the car, doors open. He looks up, and the only reason why I'm telling you this is because he died. He looks up at Marco and I, and he goes, it happened. Closed the door, and off he went. Now, the reason why I share that is because that's not something that I can put any weight on for the documentary for people like you, right? But as a personal message for me, knowing that level of validation on the inside, it kept us going. It was like, okay, why on earth would he have done that? Why on earth would he say? And that kept Marco and I going, and that was a personal level of validation. That
is there any conventional explanation why the military shut everything down? Why they had military barricades set up around that area?
No, they did try to say that the creature was this guy who's got some deformities. But I've seen the guy Modine or something like that. But you talk to the witnesses.
But why would the military shut the town down because of a guy with deformities?
And then for the doctors in the hospital, they said, there was like a midget having a baby or something weird, just something that was just so ridiculous. It was like, and you talk to the witnesses, and they're just like, oh, come on, I'm not even gonna, that's laughable at best. I mean, these girls came within 8 to 10 feet. Three women. Katya, 2 sisters, Liliani, and Valkyria, 14, 16, and 21. They got within 8 to 10 feet in broad daylight of this creature. And one of the things that doesn't come across in the film, when they saw this thing, they're looking like, what are we looking at here? They're walking through this field, and it's up against a cinder block wall. And one of them was looking at it and said, what is that? And it was crouched by the wall. It was weak and feeble. And one of them kind of like screeched. Like, what is that? And it turned, and it looked right at the girls, locked eyes on them. Liliana grabs her younger sister, who's 14, Valkyria, and hightails it out of there. Katya is 21. She's frozen in her tracks, locked eyes with this creature, and is communicating with her. Please help me. He wants help. It's weak, and it's feeble, and it's scared, and it's crouched down. Liliani realizes that Katya is back there. She gets, 100 feet down the path. She leaves her sister, stay here, I'm going back to get Katya. She runs back. And I asked Katya, and I asked all the girls, during that moment of contact, when you lock eyes, I know it's only a brief second, but during that moment of contact, what did you feel? Like, put me there. That's where the title comes from, Moment of Contact, because that was when they locked eyes on this creature, and that's when Katya said, help me, I'm scared. And it was feeble and suffering. And it's a very powerful moment. And these girls have been saying the same thing. The mother. It's the first time I'd ever reported on these so-called men in dark suits show up and intimidate witnesses. Honestly, I've been hearing about those cases for so many times, but I've avoided them because it's got so much baggage from Men in Black. It's just ridiculous. I just didn't even want to be associated with it. But I'd heard it. I can go on until I'm blue in the face. I can go until tomorrow morning with the amount of cases, with generals too. But this time, when the mother said that these men showed up and tried to get the daughters to say they were lying and offered her a briefcase full of $100 bills, they could relocate. I don't know. For some reason, I said, okay, for the first time in 25 years, I'm going to report on these guys, and I did. And it's in the movie. You hear the mother talking about it, and she's so emotional. And the mother came back to the location after it happened. The smell, that stench, and the footprint on the ground. I mean, everybody talks about that stench. They said, if you ever take like a skunk, multiply that by like 100,000, that would give you some indication of like how putrid and nasty. It was paralyzing. And it stayed in the areas, like at the hospitals when they did the x-rays. And everybody talks about it. That stench, though, it's unbelievable. Like it fills your nasal cavities and doesn't leave for a week. It was incredible. And then they all said the same thing.
And they couldn't get it out.
They couldn't get it out. Yeah, they sanitized the hospital. The guy said that he had to close off that wing of the hospital when they were sanitizing it because it was so intense. You know, so
How long did it last for?
I heard days and weeks is what I heard from people. And even the mother said when she went to where the creature was, she said that the stench, even there after the creature was gone, got in her nasal cavities, and she tried to flush it out with water and saline or whatever, and she just couldn't get it out of her nasal cavity. Really crazy. But they all did. I mean, everybody talked about that stench. You know? I mean, the military officer, the guy that drove the creature around, I was sitting across from him. You can't see his face, but I did. And I'm looking at this guy in the eyes. I'm thinking, I could be looking at a guy that drove a fucking alien around. You have no idea. You have no idea.
How did he describe it?
So fucking intense. When I came back from that trip, people were like, how was your trip to Brazil? What was it like, man? They got great, smoothies and coffee, and I'm just like, you guys have no idea. I think an alien spaceship crashed, and they recover live aliens, and we made contact, and the Americans came in. That's what I'm thinking about. So I told a couple people. On the last trip I came back, it was just like I was so rocked. I couldn't reintegrate back into culture. I was just like, fuck, I think this happened. It's the biggest story ever. So people were asking me. Even my neighbor who runs that Make-A-Wish Foundation, he was like, James, he goes, bro, I like you a lot, and I got a lot of respect for you, but you lost me on this one. And I was like, I don't blame you, bro. I really don't. But listen to the witnesses. That's all I say. And I would tell people, and I realized I can't talk about it. All I can say is, just listen to the witnesses. Don't take it from me. But I'm looking at that guy in the eyes, Joe. And I've been at this for 30 years. I'm working on my 7th film right now. I'm looking this guy in the eyes, and I'm like, this guy probably drove an alien around. And it tripped me out so hard. And it ruined his life. To get this guy to go on camera, just like a week earlier, he was like, oh, I don't care all the money in the world. I'm never coming forward. The risks are too high.
How did it ruin his life?
Because you're harboring this secret. You're being watched. You're being told not to ever talk about this. And you're looking over your shoulder all the time. And they call you, the military calls you periodically. They want to know where you are. And he's got this secret inside him that he can't tell the rest of the world. And he's thinking about all the different, everyone's out there speculating, is it real, is it fake, is it real, is it fake? And this guy drove a body around. Just think about that for a second. Think about the doctor who took the x-rays of this thing. Marco Leal, thank you, Marco, you're the man. Marco Leal found him 8 years ago. And he was like, he confirmed the story. He was still working at Regional Hospital. He goes, I'll never come forward. Marco kept going every year back and forth. Then he retired. And 4 years after he retired, he agreed to meet with us. He wasn't even sure he was going to go on. And I said, look, man, we'll film you from the back. We'll disguise your voice. Showed us photographs of him at the hospital. We know we've been trying to get at him. Excuse me, at the end of the interview, he said, thank you. I feel so much better. I've been shouldering that burden for 26 years, and I've so desperately wanted to tell somebody, to share that story with the rest of the world. And you meet these people, and you think, why on earth they didn't come to us? They're not trying to sell their story. We tracked them down, begged and pleaded with them to come forward. When I found Martha, the sister of the deceased military officer, Marco Chirizi, we were knocking on doors. I remember the sound guy from Rio de Janeiro. He was like, "You're out of your mind, dude. What are you doing? You can't just knock on random doors." I was like, "Man, if there's a will, there's a way. I'm going to find this lady." And we found her, and it was like this kind of sketchy area. And you know, it's like when you get out of your car and you can see like people drawing the curtains back and looking at you. You're standing out like, dude, I stood out like a sore thumb, man. And then we walked up. I had Marco with me, thank God, and we had camera crews and stuff. It was kind of sketchy. And Marta appears, and her husband appears, and he's a big guy. He's got like a white beater shirt on, and he looks like he wants to rip my fucking head off. And I'm like, and she's looking at me, and he's just looking at her going, Marta's looking at her husband, and her husband's looking at Marta like, give me the signal, I'll kill this guy. That's the fucking... And I was looking at Marco, and I was like, James, you need to think quick on your feet right now. And I said immediately, please translate this. I'm here to give your brother justice. I'm here to get the story out. Please, talk to me. And we developed a relationship with her slowly over that. And those were the first words that we exchanged. And we eventually got her to come forward, and we talked. She'd gone forward in the past, but she doesn't know who the hell I am.
I want to take you back to the doctor.
Okay.
When you talked to the doctor, what did he describe?
He said that it was a normal day, January 1996. It was a regional hospital. It was every day, and all of a sudden, all these military trucks and police cars showed up at the hospital. They come in armed, and they got a bag. They got a thing in a black body bag. And he was like, what the hell's going on here? They're like, you're going to be taking some x-rays. And he's like, okay. And they had him inside, and they had armed guards. And I was asking him, like, what was it like? Because when I interview witnesses, I always ask them to project. Like, sometimes I'll even close my eyes because I'll use their words to recreate. So I'm like living it through them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'll close my eyes, and I'll recreate the scenes in my head with their words. Right? It's harder in Portuguese because I'm having to get it translated, but I ask questions like, what was the atmosphere like? Was there any talking? No talking. Super tense atmosphere. Very tense. Armed guards on the outside, armed guards on the inside, military trucks running. Nobody comes, nobody goes. And he said, first time in the history of my career, I took the x-rays and I couldn't even verify that they were good because they took them immediately. And then they said this event never happened. He said the stench in the hotel, in the hospital was overwhelming. And he goes through the different x-rays that he took. The abdomen, the head, the arms, the legs, the thorax, And it was incredible. In fact, Uberajada Rodriguez, if you're listening to this, he's one of the leading researchers. He's gone quiet. Peccaccini disappeared for 20 years.
Did he get to see images himself? Did he get to see the body himself?
Oh, he was right. Well, they didn't open the body bag, but he said the stench was just overwhelming.
So they x-rayed it through the body bag?
They x-rayed it through the body bag.
So he never got to see...
He did not see the alien.
And he didn't get to see the x-ray images or anything?
Nope, they wouldn't let him see a damn thing. Nope. Now, there were two doctors. There was a guy named Roger Lear. Roger Lear found out, these are people that I really want to meet. I mean, people are coming forward in droves right now. We just got two forensic pathologists for the first time ever working together to come forward and make statements, and they're providing documentation of the autopsy reports done on the deceased military officer. That's the first time ever these guys are coming forward. It's happening right now.
Let's explain what happened to people who haven't watched the documentary to the deceased military officer.
Yeah. So right after the three girls came within 8 to 10 feet of this creature, or being, or entity, or ET, whatever you want to call it, about an hour later, when it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would say maybe around 5 o'clock, there were two military guys on patrol, on the lookout for something unusual. What they were told, they didn't tell you a UFO had crashed. They were on the lookout for something highly unusual, and it was Eric Lopes at the wheel and Marco Shirizi, military police, in the passenger seat. They were about 1.5 blocks to 2 blocks away from where the girls had seen the creature a couple of hours earlier. And this thing runs across the car in front of them. He had slammed his brakes on, and without a moment's hesitation, Marco Shirizi jumps out of the car and grabs the thing with his bare hands. Yeah. And he puts it in the back seat, and they drive it to a clinic, and the doctor is like, what the hell is that? Get it out of here. I don't know what, leave. So they went to regional hospital. And then ultimately it went to Humanitas Hospital. And so we have testimony from military ex that when he drove it from Humanitas Hospital, it's in the movie, but he drove it from Humanitas Hospital to as a military base where it spent the night in the truck for one night, and then it went from there to Espesex, Campinas. It's like a university. It's where all the intellectual scientific heavyweights reside. And then it was there, I think, under examination, according to the witnesses that we talked to, for a day or two, and that's when the Americans flew in to Campinas. And we have the radar military control officer who came forward last year, actually, 2 years ago, when we were there filming for the last time. His name is Marco Feres, F-E-R-E-S, and he came forward for the first time and said, yeah, in January of 1996, this plane came in, USAF, he kept calling it, United States Air Force, came in, it didn't have the authorization of the Brazilian government. He was like, this thing can't land, and some higher-up stepped into the room. This is his testimony. I'm just relaying what he said. He said some higher-up came in the room and said, let it land, and it came and it landed at Campinas. And then from Campinas, 2 helicopters, according to him, flew to Varginha, Brazil, Varginha back to Campinas. Then they loaded something on the airplane and then off to the United States, and that's where the case goes cold. So I will say this. One of the most exciting aspects for me to getting invited on your show is that you've got a huge platform of a lot of people listening. I want to know, we all want to know desperately, what happened when the United States took over. Where did this stuff go? Who was involved? Who flew that airplane? The flight records, all of these things. And so I'm asking you, please, if you're listening to this, to come forward and talk to us. This is an ongoing investigation. If you're too afraid to talk to me, there's new whistleblower protection that Senator Gillibrand and Rubio and a handful of others just signed into law. You can go and contact someone like Representative Andre Carson, and there's a process you can go and testify and tell everything you know without fear of prosecution or violating any NDAs. I beg and plead for you to do that. Now, there are a handful of Congress people and senators that I believe are sincerely trying to get down to the bottom of this stuff. I've met with some of them, and I've continued to try to meet with someone else. I'm working with a guy named Brian Bender. He's kind of consultant on the project. He works for Politico, and he's got great access as well. So the two of us are trying to address the evidence, the photographic evidence, the potential debris evidence, the potential body evidence. Where is it, and who has the authority to release it? And I've never really covered, and I know that I put my reputation on the line, Joe, and I totally understand for your audience that are listening to this right now and thinking that I've lost my marbles, and I completely respect that. I had the same reaction myself, and I'm not out here trying to sell crazy. I don't have a GoFundMe asking for money on evidence that I don't have. I'm not doing any of that. All I'm saying is, this is potentially the biggest story that we've all been waiting for, the story that, in my opinion, could settle the debate once and for all. This story happened in 1996, and the vast majority of the witnesses are still alive. People are coming forward in droves right now. Like I said earlier on the show, those 2 doctors coming forward, the forensic pathologist, you want science? They're giving us science. They're giving us the long-form autopsy report. Leslie Kane is having it professionally medically translated, and she'll have it looked at by medical people that she knows. So that's an ongoing investigation. Just the fact that Marco Dow, we got access to those people. I was doing Zoom calls all last week leading up to coming here, begging them and pleading them to come forward. Please.
Do you what you want is actual footage, right?
Of course we want footage. You saw what I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You think I'm going after it.
Oh, no, I know you're going after it. But, I mean, that's really what we need.
I know it's what we need. I mean, I'm telling you right now.
So close. It seems like you can just barely touch it.
So close.
It's like a movie when you're reaching for the key.
I know. You can't quite reach it. It's just like how you see it dangling right there. You're like, come on. And I get criticized out there. People are like, no photographic evidence. I don't believe it. It's all garbage. Look, you got to start somewhere, okay? It starts with a story. How are you supposed to go looking for something if you don't even know it exists? Right? So now we know that it exists. We've talked to people that have seen it. In fact, Michael Schellenberger called me up when the film first came out. And he goes, hey, this is Michael Schellenberger. I'm thinking about putting together an article for the New York Post. And I could tell he was kind of rocked by the story, right? He was like, man, this is pretty wild. I was like, yeah, I know. He goes, well, I'm thinking about putting together an article. I said, well, if I can do anything to help out, just let me know. He goes, well, I want to know about the photographic evidence. I was like, okay. I was like, well, I could put you in touch with a couple of people that have seen it. And I was actually quite surprised. The New York Post wanted more than one source. They wanted 2 sources that could see it and describe it. And we made it happen. Paccaccini was shown video footage. He describes it in vivid detail. Go find the New York Post article by Michael Schellenberger, and I suggest your audience reads this.
Yeah, I read it.
Oh, you did read it? Yeah, it's pretty cool, you know. And we know where it is, and we know who has it.
Do you have it, Jim?
And it's like the frustration is, I remember one of the people that we approached on, we offered $100,000, and there was nothing. Then we offered $200,000.
People claim they saw aliens after UFO crash landed in Brazil in 1996. Documentary reveals. And it's a trailer from Moment of Contact.
Yeah, scroll on down, I think a little further, you'll get details of the description.
That's the drawing.
That's the drawing that was done right after the incident. I actually held the original print in my hands from Claudio Colo's daughter.
So was one of them dead and one of them was alive?
Yeah, apparently. And look, there were up to accounts of possibly 5. And this is another thing that a lot of people don't even realize when they watch the movie, and it was shocking to me, was that we rented this house in this kind of gated community, and it was owned by a doctor, and they had fellow doctor friends. And they were like, oh, what are you doing in Brazil? What are you doing in Virginia? A whole camera crews and caravans of camera gear and tripods. They're like, what are you guys doing here? We're like, oh, here we go. Well, we're here to cover the Virginia UFO incident. And the doctor goes, you know, my friends saw something that you might want to talk to them about. And they kind of chuckled a little bit. They're all, these guys are serious. The whole family saw it. So we eventually go to their house, and they're like, whoa, no. We didn't say we're going to go on camera. We just said we'd meet with you. We're not going on camera. I was like, well, what do you mean you're not going on camera? Well, of course, you know I'm doing a documentary. Oh, no. We'll tell you what happened. I said, well, look, we can film you from the back. If you want, we'll disguise your voice. So anyway, we do the interview. Reluctantly, these guys did not want to do it. But they described this craft that was looking for something. It was late into the night. Late. Like probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night. They were ordering pizza. Any Brazilian will tell you they like to order pizza late at night. And they said the whole family was watching this thing. And I kept saying to them, what do you mean it was looking for? How do you know it was looking for something? They said it was going like this, really low, looking. So I shot my drone over the whole area. I shot my drone over the point where the girls had the contact, the point where Marco Shreezy and Eric Lopes captured the creature, and the point where the military blockades were. And I realized, I took my drone straight up and I filmed straight down, and I show it in the film, the proximity to all those events is within a few blocks. The house that the entire family witnessed, very credible people that didn't want to come forward, that was just a few blocks away from the incident. It looks to me like that was a recovery mission, a rescue mission that was going down. I know it sounds crazy. Believe me, I know that. And I'm putting my 30-year reputation on the line. Do you know what my reputation, when I finished the phenomenon, I had a level of government access that I never thought I could possibly have as a complete independent Joe Public guy, me, right? I'm meeting with senators and just all kinds of intelligence folks. I mean, it's a dream. Like, how could this possibly be? How could I have access? Well, I was flushing that down the toilet by reporting on this case potentially. But I did it anyway because I was like, okay, I understand that I'm sounding crazy, and I understand.
You keep saying that, but I don't think you are.
Well,
I don't think you're sounding crazy at all.
You don't? Okay.
No, well, because look,
I've gotten so much flack for this.
The town is obsessed with it. Well, I think people are very much married to their initial ideas. And when you have an initial idea that something like that is stupid, and it's probably fake. I would have heard of it. It's probably fake. And then you're confronted with what you've uncovered. And imagine if someone hadn't gone through the exhausting work that you've gone through, going back and forth to Brazil over a period of 12 years to make this documentary. Imagine. Most people would think that sounds like nonsense. I would have already heard about this. You know, it was this big. But then when you go to Virginia and you see that enormous statue of a UFO that they have.
Crazy, right?
Like, that's pretty wild. Like, who funded this? Why do they have this? Like, why is it a part of,
and the ET guy is all over the place. He's at bus stops. He's in the downtown plaza. It's like, damn.
Yeah.
And the mayor, the sitting mayor, Bears. Excuse me. Thank you, by the way, for coming forward and sharing that information with us, Mayor Bears. Mayor Bears helped us fund. It was really funny. We were interviewing with him, and I was like, "Is this guy going to say? What is he going to say? He's a sitting mayor."
Right.
And he's like, I got to tell you, man, I know a lot of the witnesses. I got to say it. I think this thing happened. I really do. He goes, if there's anything I can do to help out, you let me know. I was like, all right, pull out your Rolodex. I want you to help me find Eric Lopes. Eric Lopes is the key. He's the only living survivor of the second crash. He was a driver of Marco Teresi, right? The family of the deceased military officer, Marta, her mother, could not get statements from Eric Lopes. She said every time they pressure him, he'd be smoking cigarettes and drinking and getting really nervous and just wouldn't say anything. She wanted me to go after it. She said, we want a statement from Eric Lopes so badly. He's the only living, person witness. So I said to the mayor, I was like, yeah, if you really want to offer some help me find Eric Lopes. So he's like, no problem. So he does. So then we meet in the town square with a good connection. It was like a former chief of police or chief military guy, and his son Homolo, who's a lawyer and was a prominent politician. And he goes, "I'll take you out there to his house. Then you guys are on your own." So I was like, "All right." So this little voice, as we're all getting in our cars and driving off to go see this guy, this little voice in my head goes, maybe I should get him to walk up the door with me. So I jumped out of my car and I flagged down the Mercedes, that black Mercedes that we followed. And I told Homolo with the translator, hey, is there any chance you'd consider just walking up the door with me? I honestly think that had I not done that, he might have just opened fire on me immediately. Because who's this gringo guy walking up to his door on his property, asking questions about something he does not want to talk about? And when we got up to the door, I remember I heard talking as we walked up, and it was a pretty intense moment because I'd heard about this guy for years, but nobody could find him. He wouldn't talk to anybody. Got up to the door, and there was a handful of us, cameras rolling, and I hear voices, I hear talking, but I can't see anybody. I'm like, where is this guy? Who are they talking to? And then I realized he was up at the window looking down at us. He had his arms on the window, he was looking out the window. And he's talking to Homolo, and he's talking to the other translator. And I'm looking at this guy's face. And I saw a face. This does not translate in the film. I saw a face that I've never seen before. It was a face, Joe, that, was harboring a deep, burdened with something so disturbing and profound that I just got lost looking at this guy's eyes. I was like, oh my God, I've never seen a face like this before. And he's looking out there, and the whole time he's threatening to shoot everybody, and I didn't know what he was saying. And the translator, everything was so chaotic, the translators weren't telling me. He said it 3 times, you don't get out of here, bullets are going to start flying. Like he's military, guy, like he's armed to the teeth. But I was looking at this guy's face, and I'm looking at Dave, the DP, Dave West, and I'm like, I'm hoping that he's getting this guy's face. But Dave had the wrong lens, and the guy was looking at my DP, and he was going like this. Dave said he's never been more intimidated trying to film someone in his life. And he was like this, and he had one hand under here like that. And he kept doing that to the camera guy. And Dave said he was trying to zoom in on the face, and it was going blurry. And he couldn't, it was very intense. And then Homolo looks over at me, terminado. He doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Portuguese. I know very little. But that look he gave me, that was international. That look he gave me was, we're getting the hell out of here right now. Right now. And he's like, I'll tell you later kind of thing. And then we left. And I asked him, I was like, was he serious? Like that guy? Look, all he had to do was come outside and be like, guys. And the first thing he says, all we say is, Eric Lopes? Eric's not going to talk about the ET. That was the first thing out of his mouth. Why would you say that? It's like the police showing up at your house and you opening the door going, there are no drugs in here. It's like, well, I didn't ask that. But now that you mention it, okay, I guess you guys have drugs. And he's like, I can't talk about the tea. Eric Lopes could have just come outside and said, oh, this is a huge misunderstanding. Nothing happened. I'm so sorry that, my name got dragged into this story. There's nothing to it. That's all he had to do, and it's over, right? He didn't do that. He just threatened to kill everybody and said, I'm not talking about the ET. So that's very telling about what happened. And they just named a street after Marco Cerisi 3 days ago. So it's an ongoing story. It's a fascinating story. And I'm going to hang my hat on this, that if I have the right help, and we're all in this together, if there's enough compelling eyewitness testimony to make one think, this very well might have happened, doesn't that merit further investigation? Doesn't that merit further efforts to solve this riddle once and for all? This debate's been going on for 80 years. I'm handing this case to the world on a silver platter and saying, help me, let's get this one done.
Imagine if some of that autopsy photos got out, some video.
Well, I'm talking to the doctors, and I can tell you right now, the doctors all talk to each other. And there were doctors that shot video of that creature. I guarantee it. I know that for a fact.
And no one controlled that video? No one stopped them from doing that? No one
Apparently the doctors were left alone in the room for a while with this thing. And here's something that I really want to put out there. Hopefully this gets translated into Portuguese and the people of Brazil will hear this. The doctors that were written about in Dr. Roger Lear's book, one of my biggest regrets, I was filming in Los Angeles, 2013. I was covering the Rua Zimbabwe case, and I had flown in all these witnesses with the help of this guy, Randall Nickerson. I'd flown on all these witnesses to the landing case that happened in Africa as adults. And I was doing this really intense shoot down there. I had Kim Arnold, the daughter of Kenneth Arnold. So when Paula Harris helped me lock that, was a nightmare trying to get her on camera. And I just had so much going on. And meanwhile, I'm getting phone calls from this guy, Roger Lear, Dr. Roger Lear, and he's going, I understand you're investigating Varginha. You got to get me on camera. You got to get me on camera. And I kept saying, I will. I'll try. And I ended up, he got really upset with me. And he's like, well, if you're not going to get me on camera, I said, it's not that I don't want to get you on camera, Roger. I said, I'm so busy right now. He goes, well, what he didn't tell me was I've got cancer and I'm dying. And please get me on camera because there's aspects of the story that you need to know that I know. So anyway, he died. He gives me these tapes. And then he dies. I sent the tapes back to him, and then he died. And I got his book, too, and I was reading his book when I'm putting the film together. And in the book, it's basically a transcription of all the tapes that I have. I could see that because I have the tapes. And he's got a professional translator, and he's got this guy, Ubadajara Rodriguez, going around the countryside with him and introducing all these witnesses. And it's all on camera, except the meeting with, according to his book, that took place in the Humanitas Hospital with 2 doctors. I couldn't validate this, and I didn't put it in the movie. But if there's 2 doctors who are listening to this, apparently the creature was alive. The one that Marco Cerisi brought into the Humanitas Hospital was alive. And according to Dr. Roger Lear's book, everything else was accurate. I can't say if this was accurate or not, but he put it in his book, so I'm assuming that it is. And Ubadajara won't talk about it. He's a witness. There were 2 doctors that claimed telepathic communication with a live entity. And that's in his book. Now, I'm not telling your audience that that's true. I'm telling your audience that it might be true. We know that that entity, that creature, that being, that ET, whatever you want to call it, went to Humanitas Hospital. We know that because we have testimony from the people that took it there. We have testimony from people on the inside that claimed it was there. But we don't have any testimony from the doctors that claimed there was a telepathic communication.
Do they talk at all about what it said? It said
that they felt sorry for the human species, not realizing their potential of who they really are. Like they're not. We don't realize as a race who we really are. That's what they said. It's in his book. So anyway,
what did they mean by that?
That we don't recognize. I mean, I'm not quite sure. I guess that we don't recognize the potential that we have as human beings, who we really are. I'm not sure what they meant exactly, more than that. But if Ubadajara Rodriguez is listening to this, please come forward and tell me who those doctors are. If the doctors are listening to this, they're still alive. What does it take? What will it take to get you to come forward? Anything. Just tell me what it takes. And I can tell people to contact me at my Twitter. I guess that's the best way to tell them, right? At James C. Fox. Is that?
Yeah.
Would it be the best way to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. not going to give up my email.
Don't give out.
No, I'm not going to do that. But
let Twitter sort it out.
I want people to know about this case, and I want people to know that this is an ongoing investigation. This is not solved. This is an ongoing investigation. It's something that we could all hopefully unite and really push to get answers, both on the U.S. side and in the Brazil side. We have a lot more answers in Brazil. We've got not a lot going on. I know that Leslie Kane is pushing. She's contacting some of her people on the inside that have indicated that it did happen.
To me, one of the weirdest ones was Ryan Graves. Because Ryan Graves is explaining to me how they upgraded their systems.
Started picking that stuff up.
And they started instantaneously picking up these things that were just defying physics that they didn't have the ability to detect before because the systems weren't as good.
Just interviewed him in Washington, D.C., and you know one thing that he told me that I was fascinated by? He said that the Admiral came in, I think it was in 2015, when they just gotten that one object that was kind of rotating, kind of like a disc-looking thing. He said that the Admiral came in and he was like, oh God, the Admiral's here, and they had a debriefing on it, and they were showing the videos, and the Admiral stepped in, and he took a look at it for 5 seconds, and it's much longer than 5 seconds. He shrugged his shoulder and was kind of like, oh boy, and he walked out of the room. I was like, well, what does that mean? He goes, that means, in my opinion, that he was very aware of this. This phenomenon's nothing new. It's been going on, and they've known about it. But what can they do, right?
What can you do?
What can you do? You can try chasing them. They fly rings around your jets. I mean, they're doing what they're doing. It's almost like they have their own agenda. Who the hell knows? But they're stationary. They're in the air. He goes, they don't have to recharge.
That
they're
footage, is it the gimbal footage where it turns sideways?
Yeah, I think it's called the gimbal. There's the go fast. There's the tic-tac. There's the gimbal.
See if you can find that gimbal footage. The gimbal footage is fascinating. You see it rotate.
Yeah.
You see it do this thing that everybody describes.
Taken at night. And I'd also like to put out there, if there are any pilots, any military personnel that have any photographic evidence and you'd like to come forward with it, please do so. I've got a new project and you can do it anonymously. Hopefully you'll do it not anonymously.
This is the thing.
But whatever it takes.
It's flying.
And there's another one too, because it's slightly better. Maybe he changes the
I think he does.
Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, that looks like kind of like
change
a top.
This way, and then
with the clouds
somewhere along, and it looks very similar to those things that we were just looking at. Those photographs, very similar. It looks very disc-like.
These are the tip. That's another thing that Senator Reid revealed to me during the interview. He said that
here's it rotates.
The object.
That's wild.
He said that the material, the evidence that's been released. This was Senator Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, told me this on camera. The evidence that's been released is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, let me go through a couple cases. Do you mind?
Please.
All right. And the reason why I say this is because I talked to you earlier about that some UFOs, some UAP, I can't underline that word enough, represent or originate from a non-human intelligence. And I'm going to go through a handful of cases that I personally have looked into. These are cases that, that could prove one way or the other, certainly make a very compelling argument that some of these objects. So let's start with 1945, Trinity. Jacques Vallée just wrote a book with a woman named Paula Harris. Fascinating case. I met two of the witnesses. I went to the landing site, the alleged crash site. Very compelling. There's probably military records on that if that's the case, according to the eyewitness testimony. That should be looked into. Roswell. Now, I know your audience is going to say, Roswell's been beaten to death. And, well, how about this? Let's say that a murder took place. Even though it's 80 years ago or 75 years ago, does that make it like, oh, well, so much time's passed, let's not worry about it? No. And the reason why Roswell is so relevant, that most people don't understand, is that you had the 509th